Good morning. So I did a stream on Bitcoin and Ether yesterday, and I have very little time today. But I'm going to endeavour to do a quick stream on alts, because I promised I would, and because maybe finally, famous last words, we're getting close to things actually happening. So the others chart, start with that. Check my microphone's on. As you know, if you follow me, I've been waiting for a long time to fall off this support because we've had multiple hits on it. Then last month, and per my last stream and all that, what I was looking at was the 6-month supplies. So I'm just showing this because what we're looking at on alts. So we wanted to draw all the 6-month supplies on alts, any new 6 months, 3 months, 2 months. So there was no new 6 month on others. 3 month we'd already had up here and rejected, but what we did make was a new 2 month right at current price. So what I'm then looking for is for this to push this back down into deeper demand. And this is pretty bad for the alt market even to get here, and that alerts one with this weekly demand then there's this 3 month underneath. And I also have reservations that whether it'll even stop there. The problem with that structurally is if we come down to this yearly level, or God forbid deeper, we're going very, very low on total on the market. You know, this is a market cap chart. So we're currently at 161. If we get down to 48, that really does mean it also going to zero. But even coming from 161 to 115, 120 is not great either. So I've been reticent about longing any alts. I think I said in the stream yesterday, I've been a little bit biased on alts because I've been mostly looking at what's hitting my alerts. And what I realized when I started going through A to Z, doing the 6 month updates over the last couple of weeks, is that I've been quite biased to the ones that are going up because they're the ones that are hitting supply. Whereas in fact, the vast majority of them really look hideous. And are quite a lot I've just rejected off immediate 2 month supplies in a massive downtrend and are just going lower. So I can show you some of those in a minute, but I wanted to just cover this first. So what we're seeing now, we've seen that rejection. So I think I didn't do this on the last stream. Maybe I drew that line on the last stream, but I posted it a few times in the chat, is that this is what I was looking for price when it bounced here. This is when I drew it, to come up into the 2 month supply and then reject off it. And it's still being incredibly slow. So I think what we really need is probably a bigger drop from Bitcoin for this to happen. But also some of those the big strong alts to come down. And I don't know, it feels like it would need a catalyst. So I don't know what that catalyst could be. Based on where we're at, I was wondering if we'd get it on FOMC yesterday, but we didn't. And obviously Bitcoin came down yesterday, bounced, and is still holding. So we were watching this yesterday, and I showed this in yesterday's stream. Ether had just hit the 4 hour supply here yesterday, and I had a question in Telegram that I responded to saying, the question was, should they exit at this 4 hour demand or somewhere down here? And my answer was yes, because they're a scalper. But obviously the challenge on Bitcoin and Ether is that Ether's hit 2 month supply up here. Bitcoin, the alert went, I'm not sure where, so where are we? Off the top of the chart. The alert went for 2 months supply, but didn't quite tap it. So it's possible Bitcoin can go up and actually tap that 2 month properly. And also on both of these, I don't really like the 2 month supply, but the bullish scenario would be that they go up higher inside the 2 month supply or even take it out. But this, just looking at the bearish scenario here, which is what might drive alts to fall off a cliff, we're now rejecting 4 hour supply. Whether this is ready, obviously we're clinging to some sort of meme trend line that I've got from these two lows back here, so it's not necessarily the best trend line, but is this finally ready to come down? I don't know, we shall have to see. Total DeFi, pretty much the same thing, still clinging to support there. So I updated these charts yesterday. Maybe it hadn't quite gone through the weekly. Yeah, just a bit, they're messy, and also, you know, a lot of the alts, the ones that are holding, that aren't such an epic downtrends, are quite similar to this, just this sort of nasty chop where they're making, and similar to Bitcoin as well, where they're making 3-4 day demand supply, bouncing up and down between them just in these tight little ranges. But again, total DeFi, in an ideal world, I'd like this to fall off a cliff. I guess the bull scenario on the alt market is that we now have these 2-month supplies on others that I just showed in total DeFi, the same on total E100. A little bit higher on total E100, hasn't tested it. You know, if we do happen to get a big alt bounce and we flip this into demand, or we flip a new monthly demand, or even weeklies, you know, I could become bullish on this. But until we either do that or fall off the cliff into the next demands. So totally 100 again, just to recap, this did have history when TradingView added it last year, but then they subsequently deleted the history. It's a calculated metric, so I think they thought it wasn't good enough, I guess. Maybe totally excluding top 100 is pretty hard probably to calculate because there's so many crypto with going in and out, so maybe that's why they decided not to put the history in it. But anyway, I still have the zones with the history, and they still seem to actually get reactions, so I'm keeping the alerts there for now. Anyway, again, so this, ideally, we want this to fall off a cliff, or we need to see something different, you know, maybe we get a big pump. The problem is even if we do get a pump, let's go back to the others chart quickly, you know, how far are we going to go? So even, because that's what we're seeing on a lot of alts, you know, that some are doing these sort of big green candles here. So there's a few different structures on alts, but what they're tending to happen is they're like this, and some are still here and back in the retest area, and some have just continued back down again. So that even if we do get a big pump, that would be my reticence. But again, we would need to see what new demands made, etc., etc. Okay, so quickly on the majors. Excuse me. TRX. So I've now hidden previous alerts and things like that and just kept the kind of recent ones on here. So what we're seeing on the majors anyway is because of these ranges, we're seeing some alerts work and some just not. Like where I've been too aggressive, they tended to not work because obviously we've had Bitcoin doing this giant range and most of the alts have kind of been following similar. I suspect this was a large zone here. So the other thing is, you know, when they've got large zones, like if this was the 5-day zone, it's still holding this zone from this alert, even though it's gone deeper inside. So that's been the other difficulty with trading alts, is if they do go deeper in zones, then yeah, whether you're still trading that same, most people are trading lower time frames. So whether they would hold, you know, a 5-day entry here with a stop down here and be holding it still is debatable. TRX anyway had this kind of little triangle thing forming. Arguably it's a bear flag, but when we were coming up to the top of it, I was like, well, maybe this is going to break out and break higher, come up to this zone. So I was being slightly more aggressive on longs here, but then yesterday's one failed, and now we've come back down a bit deeper. So I'm still just looking at this little range. TRX is possibly one of the stronger ones, so it was one of the ones that I kind of thought, okay, maybe we can be a bit more aggressive on the long side. The bearish scenario is there's still, you know, we took out half these stops here, but there's still more trendline stops there. There's still zones below that haven't been tested, and we still have that large kind of double top. So not a double top, maybe even a triple top if we include that one on the higher time frames. But yeah, those are the zones we're interested in on TRX. Litecoin, again, I was similar to TRX. I was kind of saying, you know, maybe if Litecoin breaks out here, it's going to be a precursor to Bitcoin breaking out. Unfortunately, it hasn't broken out. It has made weekly demands. So again, need to see what reaction we get on this. Still, so arguably this is still very much downtrend. We have to drop, retrace, drop, and this is potentially a retrace, and it's come up into the first sort of clean supply here. So maybe we're just going to get a continued drop of that. Alternatively, you know, we could get a bounce here up to the next zone, and then we just see what the reaction is there. So for now, again, this is a more aggressive long entry. I like it a bit less now it's taken so long to hit. I had an aggressive short there for a 12-hour, and it came down, tapped the weekly, went up and did take out the high, and then it's come back down lower again. So again, just little scalps on these. Again, good, decent sort of scalp long entry there, and then the short entry, I think it might have held a larger zone here, but again, went higher inside it. That could possibly be deleted, that. Yeah, so I had a 2-day supply here, did go right to the top of it, and then came back down for the long entry. So as I say, just looking for those scalps more than anything else on these, and trying to just stick a little bit with the bias of where I am with the overall picture on each alt, because they are operating differently. Historically, we've had alts basically doing the same things, but really that's not happened now for the better part of a year. So, and excuse the wet hair, by the way, I've just got out of the shower. And yeah, and it's not been typically I would have gone, okay, I want all alts to hit demand at the same time, or all alts hit supply at the same time, or at least the majors, even if we're not having like the more shit coins doing that. But even recently, we haven't really needed to follow those rules either. So while we've got Litecoin hitting demand that I've just shown here, we've got Ripple just having hit supply. So daily supply, 4-day supply in there. It's still tight in a range. We still might find a bottom here. This is a demand. It did wick through. This could just be a retest. We had the retest off the top of it there. It could just be a retest, but again, I need to see some supply break and some demand hold. And at the moment, again, we had a weekly supply. It rejected it, came down, tested again, came down. So it's still sideways range here, but it's still underneath weekly the macro supply. And then we've got a local daily here. So again, are we ready at some stage for a bigger drop down to annual here? And if we get back up there, we'd look for shorts, but we're not confident at this point that we're going to get back up there. I'm confident, should I say. And then finally, BCH. BCH was one of the stronger ones off the bounce, and I did have an alert for along at a weekly demand here, or a 3-weekly demand. I think it was a bit of an interim one actually, and I preferred to look down here. Sorry, just a quick message. I preferred to look down here for longs, but then because of what the market was doing, I think I put this in as a possible interim long. And again, reasonable reaction off the first one. It took a wick down, and then reasonable reaction thereafter. So I have put in a possible long entry on this. It's now currently testing 4 or 5 day demand in there. Hopefully it'll come down to this, but again, that's a possible area to look for a long there if the market's in a decent spot, because BCH has had one of the bigger drops. We are in massive demands here, annual, 6 months, etc. But it was difficult. I think I've looked at the high time frame on this a few times, and it's now, yes, we're in major demand, but we also came off major supply, and it really isn't just in a macro range. So having and lower highs, so we've got higher lows, but we've also got lower highs. So this is still quite an aggressive area to look for big picture longs. If you were bullish on this, that this is still probably preferred. But you never know. Maybe we'll get a higher low here. Maybe we get a decent up move before, even if it does come down here, maybe it moves into here and gets a bigger bounce before, all the way up to there before coming down. So that's what we're looking for with these interim moves. So those are the old majors. Then looking at the new majors, BNB has just been, is going to load. BNB has just been painful, quite frankly. Overall, like I say, I've hidden the entries now, but overall, this was an area for longs. We were looking at 2 months demand. I think it's also 6 month demand, but then this actually has made a 6 month supply. So as I said, I'm going through this quite quickly, and I'm not doing the detail that I probably should be. It's in a 6 month demand, but it's also flipped that to a possible 6 month supply, week supply. So we may or may not get a reaction there, but obviously I have alerted that. There's a 3 days of 6 months at the same time. So watch that if we get back up there. But at the moment it's still indecisive. However, we were looking for longs coming back down into this area. So on top of that, so we've got 3 day 6 month supply there. Then we've got a monthly supply here. So this potentially is turning now bearish, where we were bullish before because we were still in an uptrend, and this was one of the stronger ones. Difficulty being we've got annual demand a little bit lower. But similar to Bitcoin, as I said yesterday, if you watched my stream yesterday, we had Bitcoin, it's in 3 months demand, 2 months demand, but it's now made a new 2-month supply. So it becomes, the markets have become very indecisive. And BNB is no different, and has been causing me a lot of grief. So we did, like locally, we did make, I think I had a retest on daily demand here, which was fine. Then we made a 5-day demand, but then it just came and whipped back through it, flipped it to 5-day supply. Then again, we made a 3-day demand a couple of days ago. And while I say these are all weak demand, weak supply, and we're still in, and you can see this is a triangle, it's a clear range, which makes these zones much harder, much less probable and harder to trade. So now you can see we've made this triangle. So this alert here is not for a short, this is for a trend line break that you can see there. The clock on that trend line. So I've just finally gone, okay, that we need to see if this gets a decent green candle out of here, then I'll look for a retest rather than like continually trying to get entries in this choppy, nasty zone. Possible we'll make a 2-day demand today. We've got 12 hours. But again, like, do you want to trade in this mess? I'm not, so that's up to you. I'm not sure. But as you can see now, where this is making a bit of a triangle, so maybe we will get a push out of this, and then we'd have to watch. So we've got 1 month supply there and a 3-month level. And then that 6-month up there that I talked about, we just need to see what the reactions are on those. And then down here, got a few, the orange lines are for trend line, potential little stops that could get zones that could get stop hunted under here, and that annual zone. That's BNB. Link was a bit of a dark horse, actually, surprise. That although I say that, it again came into 3 months demand, took out the wick from the dump back earlier this year, and then I had this entry for 8-hour demand here. I think I talked about this back then, that I had a few of these had these 8-hour demands, or one maybe daily demands at the bottom, and I'd alerted a couple of them, the ones that I thought were on stronger demands. And at the time, it actually looked like this was going to fail. I think it was somewhere in here, and the wicks had come right down to the bottom of this zone, but ultimately, actually, in fact, it did hold. Got a re-entry into here, but now Link has gone up. It's the only one, I think, of the majors has gone up, and it's hit the 2-month supply. Just missed my alert for 4-day. I guess that's 4-day supply, and then there's a weekly just above that inside the 2 months. So unfortunately, so again, now this is going to be interesting. Is this going to be bearish? Having just rejected there, slightly front running my alert, are we going to get a bigger drop on this? It would be very nice to finally come down and hit these zones down here, which haven't been tested. And again, people say, oh, you're so bearish, But I mean, when you look at a chart like this, it doesn't have to be bearish. This can be still very bullish on the macro. We've got a retrace, we've got an A, a B, and as we get a C wave. And this is when I would look for that bigger potential up move. There is a chance that we have this triangle correction, the drawing patterns I've drawn many times. Like, I don't do much Elliott waving, but I do look at the corrective patterns that we get in the A, B, and C wave. So maybe this will make, I've drawn that very badly, but maybe that'll make a triangle there. Could still make a higher low. So that, and it's possible this is a zone that hasn't been properly tested yet. That's now finally being tested. But the problem we have, excuse the sort of mess on my chart, is this rejection of 2 week supply here, 2-month supply, not rejection, but test of 2-month supply there, and whether this 3-month demand is going to be enough to eventually push that through. So we shall see. It now has weekly demand here, so I have alerted for the weekly demand in there, and I had also previously alerted for this 2-day to be tested. So I will look for longs more aggressively on this. I am slightly more long biased on Link than anything else. But the difficulty with this hitting 2-month supply up here. Then finally on this layout, we've got ADA. So ADA again, so this I had previously alerted, I talked about this before. So this is that ABC that we're talking about. So this is exactly what I was just saying on Link, really. That we've had that, we've got the A, and this is something I've drawn, I've got saved that I drew this months and months ago, A, B, and C, but we were looking for, again, were we going to get the triangle and get a bounce here, or would we get a zigzag and come back down into this lower zone? And you can see on ADA, that's exactly what it's done. But on the macro now, it's just tapped into the top of that monthly there. I think because of this chop here, I wanted a little bit lower, but I had my first alert for this. There was a 3-week, then a monthly, then a 2-monthly, then another 3 weeks. So again, it could hold in any of these areas, but potentially, I think it's, worth looking. I haven't commented so far, worth looking at BTC pairs for confluence. So have a check. A few of the majors are all-time low, so it's hard to know. This might be a one that's all-time low, I'm not sure. But if there is confluence on the BTC pair with that hitting demand, that can help you. So again, on this so we had a decent bounce here, but then it just swing failed the weekly zone there. So like the others, it's just in this range. So my first time we had this long entry there, came down deeper in the zone, and the short entry failed when it went straight up through there. And then I've kind of haven't had anything more aggressive on it since. I had this alert from before and the wick didn't quite hit there at the moment. I've still got it in. I don't know if I'd love that if it went back then now. I really wanted that to hit on the kind of the mini B wave. And similarly, I was considering longs here in these zones. Zone drawn there. So this is a daily demand, but because of those trend line stops there and the fact that I've got zones down here that haven't been tested, I've been a bit more reticent. Plus the others chart, and the driver of thinking the others chart is going to fall off a cliff. That means these alts are going to have to take another lower low for the vast majority of them. So again, slightly more aggressive short entry here on 1 day, 4 day supply, and then maybe we'll see if that comes down into here. If you want to look here for a long, feel free. There are pros and cons of all these things, and this could well hold if the market's not ready to fall. So you can keep an eye on that. Then the second set of new majors. So as you may remember, I did remove, I removed Dot and Atom because they were no more major about them, and I put in Hype and Zcash as two of the stronger ones. I was considering removing Near as well, and I'm still considering, but at the time it was giving some quite nice, and it has given some very nice tradable swings, shorts in fact. So I'm kind of glad I kept it in there, but at some stage, if and when that ever starts to die completely, which I suspect it will at some stage, I will change that to XMR, which I think was the next one on the top market cap. So Hype, just kind of bouncing on this little meme trend line there. So it did have a 2-week demand. So I was a bit reticent about being too aggressive on shorts. Earlier on, we had the trend line break here that I talked about, but then I was wanting a test up into this daily supply here, and those wicks didn't quite get there. It still has left some little stops above there, so maybe it'll come back, but now obviously it's dropped off quite significantly from there. It has given some nice shorts on this, on the lower time frames, but like I say, I only put one in when we had the 3-day made there. I might put a new one if we get another 3-day made here, but at some point, some of these, they can get down, particularly coming down into demand here. We could get a bigger bounce off this, and we have seen that. For example, I've just seen UAI alerts coming through, so UAI has decided to do that. Having looked like it was going to fall off a cliff, it's suddenly done a giant candle today. But yeah, so Hype unfortunately has left trendline stops in here and quite a lot of untested zones. So again, I don't love that, because then you get the two scenarios. You could get it just falling off a cliff. I suspect Hype won't fall off a cliff, because unless the whole market does, because people are bullish on Hype and a lot of people are watching it. But what we might get is a bounce in here, a bounce in here, a bounce in here, and then that's if we bounced on all of them. And just messing around on the way down, or just to the sort of the 61 retracement area or something like that. But yeah, so that's not ideal. But the first alert there would be for 3-month demand, and then the 6-month just below. So those two ones, the tops of those zones are going to be key to see if there's a bounce at the top of those zones. And so it has been looking a little bit distributive here. So let's see if we get that bigger drop. See where that top trend line might be. Put that in there just in case we get some sort of up move off here. So that's hype then, Zcash. So keep Zcash again. I think a lot of people are calling this all-time high. This is not all-time high. I've got the extra zones drawn in from the history. If you go look at the Zcash US dollar chart, US dollar, not US dollar tether, you will see there is some history that has higher zones. So we do have a monthly up at 950 and then some significant highs here at 800. Having said that, again, it's done this sort of similar pattern that we've seen with a lot of other things. We have an annual demand down here. So same pattern I drew on ADA and Link. Are we going to get a triangle correction here? I mean, arguably we've already had that on the wick. But from now, what are we going to get? A continuation here? Is it going to be a triangle, or potentially are we going to get that zigzag that's going to come down into lower zones? Based on the lower high, I was more short biased on this. I haven't been long biased. We might get a bounce in here, so you can look at around 420 for longs if you want, scalps or otherwise. I was a little aggressive here. It has now again made a weekly demand, or weekly demand. So whether this is going to hold, I don't know. But I haven't been aggressive on the long side because Zcash is just simply high. Another one that definitely worth looking at, the BTC pair on this for confluence. So yeah, while we were downtrending here, like at this point, I think I had an alert there for a short. At that point, we made a higher low, but at the point I put the alert, we probably wouldn't have done. Go to the daily. So yeah, I think I put the alert in. Maybe that's a bit higher than it should be, I don't know. I would have put it over here. And what you really want for these alerts to hit is you want this to go to a lower low and then come back and test. Whereas at this point, ignoring that bigger wick anyway. Whereas it had made a higher low before testing and therefore has come up higher inside. So this alert did go for 12-hour supply up here, but the wick didn't quite get there, so I reset that alert. And then again, daily supply here. I think, again, there was another daily there. I didn't come up and test that. I probably could have alerted that, but I was thinking, is this going to come up and test the zone, take out the high again, particularly now it's made weekly demand. So there is a chance that this is going to do one more push, even if we do get the bigger drop thereafter, and take out that high again. From a bull-bear perspective, just while we're here, I'll comment on that. For me, it's similar to over here. We have an impulse up, a decent impulse down, and then a choppy move up, and then a decent drop. So here we have a impulse up, a drop down, and now we're getting that choppy move up, and are we going to get a drop from there? So there's things to watch and be aware of on Zcash, but we're just seeing that weakness coming back in compared to the original impulse strength. And what else we got? Solana. So Solana, again, I was more bullish. It had hit a decent area that I wanted at the lows weekly. Obviously, it can come down deeper in that zone, hoping it won't just fall off a cliff. So it's been a while, but one thing to be aware of with this chart is a similarity with the Ether BTC. So this is a very similar distributed pattern, and Ether BTC has come down to this low. So be conscious of that. Structurally, again, we've taken out the high. I made a high, so we failed the high. Is it going to come and take out this low? For now, however, like I say, we hit weekly demand there. It gave a decent up move. I had a couple of more aggressive entries. I was reticent, so this short entry was black because I wasn't sure if we were going to wick up to take out these trend lines, but it turned out it worked out perfectly. Talked about this quite a lot in the previous streams, I think. So re-entry in here, then I had a re-entry here, and I'd said there was a daily and a weekly, and I had the more aggressive daily alert there, so it's had a bit of a bounce, and now we've come down and hit the weekly. And I have put a retest short here for now. Again, I would have liked this to have hit before so much consolidation and before hitting the weekly, so maybe this is lower probability now, again, particularly with those stops up there. But a lot of this is just to see where the market is at. If Bitcoin's suddenly doing a random pump and going higher in the 2-month supply, then obviously don't look for shorts on this as aggressively as there. Was that it on Solana? Okay, so actually, I didn't talk about, well, yeah, if we go lower, as I said, we've got the possibility of going much, much deeper, but just a little deeper into the weekly demand if we're going to continue this sort of sideways chop for now. Daily supply up there, and now it's made 3-month supply higher. So as I said, I haven't talked about all the monthlies, but make sure you draw all the monthlies on the chart, because a lot of these now have 2 month, 3 month supply that they didn't have previously. And finally, near. So near was one of the strong ones off the lows. I was looking for longs on this for such a long time. Because I think it had made, so this, I mean, this is a prime example actually of weak supply and demand. I think if you look at the higher time frames, there's some major zone in here, like 3 months, 6 month or whatever. And I think I kept looking for longs through this, like thinking, hopefully this is going to do a decent move. But what we say, when I say weak demand, what I'm saying is we've made a demand here, but the demand hasn't been enough to take out this high. So when it comes back to test it, so if we come up to there before coming back to test it, then we expect a decent move. We expect this to be strong demand. In this case, I'll just be consolidating and making a larger triangle, or a massive consolidation. But what we're saying is this demand wasn't strong enough to take out these suppliers. So when it comes back here, it may not give such a strong bounce. And that's what we saw very much on there. You know, we had some bounces here, it tried, and then it's come down and taken out the zone. Now we could get, again, we have a strong demand here because it's made new highs from no data. So again, want to be more bullish on this, but we have come up into 3 monthly supply there, I think now, 3 month supply. Again, had trend line stops here, so I had some hope, you know, I was thinking maybe I shouldn't be so aggressively short, maybe this is going to come up and take out those stops. But again, it hasn't. So we had quite a few nice entries on this. This has been very nice to trade. So those initial entries on hitting the monthly supply, a more aggressive short entry, but it did go up and take out the high, so it didn't really get those early shorts on this, so it was choppy. Similarly here, 3 day supply short alert came up higher in, like it still held that giant zone, but it's come up higher in the zone, but then obviously didn't get to the real preferred entry, which would have been a test back up here. Here we broke the trend line and got a nice retest entry there, and then since then it's just given some really nice short re-entries. Now coming down, like I didn't want to hit to, I was toying with putting new alerts in here yesterday on the weekly. So you, again, might get a bounce here, you can keep an eye on it. I've previously had alerts down there. I just don't like these gaps, you know, it might come down and try and fill some of that gap. And we are coming off 2 month supply. So while I think there's bias for potentially going and taking out stops off these highs and all these new ones that it's made here, it doesn't, we have bias towards that. But we are still in a bigger macro downtrend. You know, this downtrend has been going on since, you know, March 2024, down, retrace down. I mean, you know, so this is the strongest up move we've had since then. So worth looking for longs for sure, but do we still want to be that aggressive, or are we going to need this to come back down and test the low before going back up or doing anything decent if it is going to hold this as a major support? Anyway, now, yeah, so for now I've left this alert in because it does have a weekly supply in there, so I think it's worth, there's a daily and the weekly, I think it's worth looking for shorts still if it comes back up here, and just see what or at least see what the reaction is. You know, if it doesn't run through, then it runs through. But yeah, so that's near. And now we're going for time, so that's 35 minutes so far. And I've probably got 10 or 15 more max really. And like I say, I really wanted to discuss some of these alts because I think people are struggling with them, and I understand, you know, the chop has been difficult. Alts have been significantly more difficult than they have been previously. Like I say, I feel like I was a little bit biased from just looking at the ones that were alerted because I was seeing the stronger ones. So here you can see an example of UAI. So I've been trying to get into shorts on this, really wanting this trend line to be taken out. So many alerts over time. But then for a long time, I was actually long bias on this, but it's actually one of the few that hasn't, despite consolidating for now almost a year, hasn't done that big candle yet. I was actually really hoping for a long time this would pull one of those giant candles like Rave or those. So maybe it'll do it now just to spite me. But again, we've made these trend line stops here, so maybe we need to take that wick down, monthly demand first, I'm not sure. But then today we've had this giant candle, but this is indicative of some of the alts. They are just quite awkward like this. Then we've got things like, so Zama I talked about in a bit in the group. they're very variable and they all need to be taken on their own merit. So what I typically said is wait till something hits a major supply and then look for 8-12 hour supply to re-short or to get into re-entries if you haven't got the initial entry that's aggressive, with the widest stop. And the ones I tend to keep on these layouts are the ones that fail, because then I want to watch them and try and get back in later. So Zama I've been watching, so here we did have a short re-entry that was aggressive on 12-hour supply. It had still held hourly demand, so unfortunately this came back through and has made some new 12-hour demands. Similarly, Zama is only in a daily supply here. There's no particular reason it should stop here. It's not a high time frame supply, so that's kind of one of the reasons that Zama has kept going. Also, what we're seeing is some of the pump groups pumping these, and they pump them, they wait until they're halfway up and they pump these last bits. And I can maybe show ESP as an example of that. We were sort of giggling a bit about it yesterday, that where has it gone? I haven't got it on here anymore. One of the so I called this back here where the question mark is. I'd said in the group, this looks actually like it might do a little bit of a run. I said, if you want to be aggressive, you can enter here, there's a daily demand, or I've got an alert on the weekly, which has only just hit now. We got a pump off that. And then somebody posted, I'd actually forgotten about it, but then somebody posted in the group yesterday about a certain pump group had said to long this up here. And this is what happened thereafter. So this is kind of a good example of what can happen. ESP actually is not great. There are better ones, so maybe I won't cover that on there. Let's just put this chart back to Zama so I can keep watching it. Coty might be so Coty is still an early one. So as it came into 2 monthly supply, I had a reaction, Fitness now wicked and taken out today. This is the difficulty, that some of them are just getting straight rejections off 2 monthly supplies when they come up for a test like this. Others are taking wicks through them. And that's why you just need to treat each one on its merits and trade them as best you can. The 8 or 12 hour supply flips are generally still the most reliable, although there are, like I say, a couple that have failed recently. Cato was another one I thought I can look at that failed recently. You can see Coty's gone a bit higher, but still. So here's another example similar to Zama. So I had an alert here for 8 hour supply for the re-entry after it hit monthly supply, and it has dropped, but only dropped into the local demand, and again then just went higher inside the zone. So the difficulty you always have is these zones are massive. We've got a massive 2 month there, and it's in a monthly inside it, so that any or all of these alerts, if you trade based on a monthly with your stop up here, are all still fine. But what we're looking at trying to get, okay, we've got the hit on the high time frame zone, and how do we get in on the lower time frames? So Cato again went higher, come up into the next zone, then again made alert should be in there. It's made a 12 hour supply. I did say it could reject at the level of the 12 hour, but there's also a 2 hour right at the top. So again, these are still aggressive short entries. You can see we did get a reaction there, and it did come a bit lower, but not really enough to be tradable, not into demand. But these are aggressive short entries. We are still very much in an uptrend, so aggressive and they're high risk. But what we do find is when eventually they work very well, so it's worth watching them. So even if you get stopped out of a couple, what you're then hoping is you get something like this later. So Bank is one of the examples of Bank, and Ake are the two examples of the certain pump group who pump them beyond probably where they should have been pumped. And I'm not sure exactly whether that was in here or up here, but I actually very, very probably they've pumped it from up here, so it did drop and then it's just pushed slowly higher. Bank does have some history from a previous chart. Again, it's been deleted off here, but I've still got my lines in. And I always think it's worth doing this because it has, nobody knows this 3 month exists except the very few people like me who've put them in from the earlier charts. But you can see it's perfectly reacted off there. And similarly, we had reactions off weekly, 3 weekly here. We had a reaction off the monthly or 2 monthly in there. And then it's come up to this 3 month. So the point of being aggressive. So let's go to the lower time frame. So again, this did have a drop off here, worth looking for a short when it came up to test this 8 hour supply, but just didn't do much. Had a bit of a bit of a reaction, but then held this supposed, probably what everybody else is seeing as a breakout level above this orange level here, pushed up higher, came into the 2 month again, and then took this big wick into the 3 months. So these would have been either stopped out or very difficult to trade. I mean, this wouldn't have given a trade. And then this, you just need to wait, because this, well, this doesn't look bad when you look at it like that. Like this, these are huge drops already. So, you know, even just from that wick, that's a 45% drop just from that green candle at the top. But then what you're looking at is the retest increase. And somebody asked me yesterday about how they would enter this. So you could enter this, could have entered this, and you know, with your stop up here, but it's an 89% stop. And we talk in terms of R and not we're talking and risk reward rather than percentage stops, but still, you know, to get an 89% drop, you know, this is only 1R. We'd have to come all the way down here for this to be a 1R trade. So I said, you know, that's not an ideal trade, but that's really what you're doing. Well, I said, or you're looking at what you've got on the lower time frame. So here we also had an hourly on the lower time frame. So you can instead, rather than trading with your stop all the way up the top, you can make a thesis that, okay, you're just going to only trade this while this hourly in here holds. And then you would have got a decent, so that would be 6R trade if you held it to around where it is now. And then there were various other options. You can also look at once the reactions happen, there's a 30-minute supply in here, you could have jumped in on that. There's various options. So I've now added, we've got a 4-hour and a 12-hour supply in there. So again, added those for looking for a retest if this comes back up there. But you can see the mess that we've got on some of these charts anyway, and they are easily pumped by pump groups. So if the pump groups do get on them and you've just gone into a short and they suddenly decide that there's a breakout trade and it's going to, you know, 1 million, I've seen like those, as we're used to, those crazy, where's that on the chart? Why has my, have I just, oh, it's used Maxi, I put the wrong one on Zama. I was like, why have all my drawings suddenly disappeared? Yeah, if you pick the wrong chart and a pump group pumps it and you're looking for a short because you know it's just hit supply, know that it probably will come back down, but it can overshoot. What it can normally come back down, and we can get those situations like ESP. So I think in this actually the pump group didn't manage to pump it much higher, but maybe it took a last couple of wicks, I'm not sure. Didn't have a short alerted on this, but then it has completely died thereafter. What else? So that's really what I wanted to highlight. And I mean, like, just don't be disheartened because it's not the easiest market to trade at the moment. Stick with the 8 and 12-hour reversal trades on the short side. I think that's fine. Longs are hard as well. You know, the longs are much less reliable when, you know, they're getting little scalps and bounces and things like that. These are some of the new ones. But some of them, for example, like this, you know, they're taking their time. So the alert went from this 28th of July, well, it's only a day, but it's a 4-hour chart that we're on now. But some of them are just taking their time, and similar to this, you know, even if you'd got in here on the daily demand, yes, it's had a decent up move, but you would have had to, you know, get out in these scalps, like get out at the first supply on these, unless you really want to hold. No, in fact, I can't even recommend that. Like historically, I would have said, okay, if it's got good fundamentals and you want to hold it and you think it's a low, that's fine, you know. So if you love TNSR, you know, there is a thesis that, you know, it's coming down, it's testing this support over here as well. You know, maybe your thesis is like those crazy groups that say this is going to go from here and, you know, have a target all the way up here. But I just don't think that it's sensible in this market. I think, you know, even if something does have fundamentals, the chances of it doing that before stopping you out or going down 90% first are far too low to warrant holding for any period of time. So I think you can potentially hold, you know, if this has had a decent move off here, you could potentially hold and see if this gets higher or gets to take out that higher and starts a little uptrend. But at the moment, we're just looking at, okay, we've got a pump. That was what I wanted to talk about, actually. This is a good example of that. So these, you know, you get these ones that have the giant pump, but when they come back down, in fact, this actually did get a decent bounce off there, but a lot of these are just coming down into here and just getting this small sideways and they're just drifting. So the longs on the long side is not great either. If I go back to, let's just run through, because I did the G's. I didn't even think I finished the G's yesterday. Did I finish the? Yeah, I did. I went on to because I was on each bar. I remember looking at that. So that's what I was saying. Yeah, so some of the older ones that I was talking about earlier, some of these coins with history, we are finding now coming back down into demands. So, but there's few of these, few and far between, and a lot of them are coming to all-time lows. But I can't remember what's got history or not anyway. But yeah, if I just scroll through some of these, you can see. So, Gabe, just downtrend, 2 month supply. Gala, yeah, this is most indicative of what I'm seeing on so many of these. You know, they had pumps, they've rejected, had some sideways move, and now we're just continuing down for a year. You know, this has been going for a year. I've talked previously about, so some of these I've had a kind of aggressive long entries that you'll see if I scroll through some of them, aggressive long entries, and I'm looking for a higher low at this point, for example, or at this point. But yeah, do bear in mind that the vast majority that I've said, you know, these are not high probability trades. And it was just like a possibility. I started to put some of them on the off chance that Bitcoin was going to bounce when Bitcoin hit the 2 month demand. But for the most part, this doesn't have any. But for example, there, for the most part, they're getting tiny bounces and then just drifting lower. Gas, another example. Okay, this hasn't broken all-time low yet, but still drifting. New 2 month supply. Genius is a new coin. So this. Again, even this, you know, I put an alert here for daily demand that's just hit now. You can keep an eye on it, but there is no reason why this should bounce here. You know, it's broken the low, it's hit weekly supply, so this is still very much in a downtrend, but, you know, you never know, you can see. So I alert some of them just on the off chance, particularly the ones without history, because they're the ones that might actually give a decent bounce. Giga, another example of something, yeah, that's had those few days of pump. May in this case, and then it's just drifted back down. It's got a weekly demand here, but I think I stopped alerting them because most of them you're just not seeing them hold. And here's an example of what I was talking about, you know, where I have been more aggressive, thinking, oh, maybe, or just more scalps on this. Still biased to the short side, but then, you know, that last long entry there just failed, or long alert entry. Giggle, another one that's in major demand, but just giving choppy. Phone call from London. I'm actually flying to London today, but I didn't expect that. I don't know why I've got a phone call from London now. Anyway, so yeah, again, shorts and longs on this, like looking at trading both ways. I think that long would have failed, but the shorts are generally being more reliable. But now, big 2 month supply there, so we're just going to get that immediate rejection and drop lower. Get low. Another one's come back into weekly demand, give a tiny bounce. Like even the ones that are hitting, you know, sort of fairly major demands are really giving very little. Okay, it can come down deeper inside. Maybe we're going to get something more out of this, but I don't even know what this coin is. GLM, the one broken the all-time low. I think this did have more history in a previous chart because I had to redo this chart yesterday, but again, now I've got a new 1 month, 2 month supply in there, so just alerted that for possible shorts. This GMT, very indicative of what we're seeing on so many of them. You know, just the short entries have all worked really, really well, and any of the aggressive longs, you know, here at this point in time, maybe you would have thought that's made a low and was going to break out, but no. Here will just be, again, a more aggressive long entry, hoping that we're going to get another wave, even if it was just to get up into this supply, but it didn't even give that. So longs just generally, I just don't think are a high probability. Hi, Loggy. Check Hex. Isn't Hex is like an ancient coin? Yeah, okay, I'll have a look at it in a sec anyway, but yeah, just to finish up on this, so this is why I wanted to show some of these charts just so you can see, you know, the bearishness that we're seeing across the board. So GM text there, so it's the alerting on the Bybit chart, but yeah, so it has an annual supply, we've just had some short entries, but you know, people are calling longs on these, but just bear in mind what they're doing on the previous time frames, on the previous waves. You know, there is no reason for this to be having some giant up move. They are leaving trendline stops. Like when the move happens, I do think the move will be good, and I think it'll be big because they're leaving a lot of untested zones and a lot of trendline stops. But what I want to see is that falling off a cliff first. like we see on the others chart. GNO is another one. So this is one got enough history for possible higher lows on this. So some of these like potentially might be nice, but we're still looking at a chart that's been consolidating since 2021. Goat, another one that's going down to all-time low. The other challenge, so again, just probably a final thought on this, is the other challenge is, how much of these retracements are going to happen. And so it is very hard to know, and I was thinking that more yesterday as I was continuing to do alerts on these. Like, for the most part, I'm alerting 1 month, 2 month supplies. And like I say, that's why I think I'm biased to the stronger one. So let's say this had a pump up to the yearly. Like, then I'm looking here and it's messing around in here, and this is what we're seeing on some of the other charts. So then I'm biased to thinking, oh, we're getting good bounces on some stuff. But in fact, what the vast majority are doing are exactly what we see here, where they're getting little green candles and then more of drops, and maybe some sideways consolidation and then more of a drop. And the challenge here is, should I put these aggressive alerts in weekly supply? So this is a 3-week supply, in fact, there. Or on the higher zones when they're filling gaps, or on the major zones like monthly supplies and things like that. Okay, so all right, I'll look at Hex. Hex barely even exists anymore. Do you remember charting this a long time ago? This reminds me of one of those ones that I just looked at a minute ago, GNO. It's actually slightly more interesting. At least this has an uptrend on the weekly. Don't know if I want to chart this whole thing now, because again, like I say, I'm lacking on time. But yes, this is better with an uptrend on the weekly, but again, nothing dissimilar to what we've seen already. So we've got 3 month. So it has had a decent bounce. It's got an uptrend on the weekly. However, it's in a downtrend on the 3 month chart. Hasn't tested that 3 month above, so at least there is a driver to maybe go higher inside there, but has come up in the test of this 2 month supply there. Oops. Yeah, that was 2 months. I'm going to put in every zone on this, but it does have a monthly demand. Okay, I'll give you the fact this has a monthly demand. Still a bit tentative, but okay, so the difficulty I have with this is that we're in an uptrend. We are retracing. If this is a 61 fib, that would be good. However, we are in an immediate downtrend, up, retrace, up, retrace, up, retrace. So there is the distinct possibility this goes back and tests the start of this up. Is it a reversal here? Possible. We do have, so we have this retest here of 2 month supply, so my bias is down. However, we have a monthly demand. If, and it's still very much an if, you can look for longs here if you want. If we get a bounce here and it takes us through the 2 month supply, it's going to be slightly challenging because we're just going to hit the 3 month above there anyway. However, then we're starting to look at a break of structure, and then we can look at a retest entry with more confidence that it's going to go up. So in preempting that happening, yes, you could look for longs in here on this monthly, but yeah, like I said, just be conscious of that immediate downtrend that's going on here. And I'm not going down to the lower time frames. I can see there's a big green candle here. Doesn't have to go all the way down to the 6 month there. Maybe there's some weekly zones in or something here, or maybe there's even something on the daily that's warranted it bouncing there, but I'm not checking that low at the moment. Anyway, yeah, so are you in this? Loggy 33. But yeah, it's interesting. I remember, yes, Hex is, I'm sure Hex is something, or I don't know if I'm mixing it up, I think, with H-bar. I think someone's asked me about Hex a long time ago, but I haven't got it on the chart, so either that it's disappeared. But the concern is with Hex now is it's not listed anywhere. So if it's been around since 2020 and not listed anywhere, then it makes me a little bit nervous. But then I don't know enough about fundamentals, so I guess we'll see. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up there because that is 56 minutes and it is time for me to go and finish packing and go to the airport. I hope that's useful. So, like I say, be really wary of your longs on alts at the moment. Continue to be wary. I'm particularly wary now because we're so on the edge here. If you start to see some alts really start to move, then maybe I'm wrong and this is going to hold a support for the 15th time. But for now, I remain short biased and I want to see long entries down here. But the other thing to be fully aware of is that hasn't been a 100% success rate on this, but there is a decent success rate of the market doing a massive move whenever I'm on an aeroplane. So I will be on an aeroplane this afternoon from 4 until 7 this afternoon from 4 until 7. So that's UTC. So yeah, I'd be wary this afternoon or in the New York session that there could well be a big move while I'm on the plane because the market likes to do that. And yeah, like I say, so set your own alerts down here. If you follow me, you'll get the alert. You can see I've set there, and this is the kind of interim. And failing that, all the way down here, which would be horrible. But this, in fact, yeah, this isn't it the Crypto Clarity Act is coming up. Like, if there's something happens with that, could that be a catalyst for the market doing a decent sized move? Anyway, as I say, try and position yourself in shorts. That is my bias. The longs we will get in on retests if and when the market shows us that we can do that. And yeah, other than that, have a great weekend, and I will try and come back next week. Please feel free to hit me up with any questions in chat or anything like that, and I will talk to you soon. Have a good day.